Hi, I'm Dr. Jan Dabrowski. I'm an astronomer, and I've loved observing the sky ever since I was a child. By the time I was 11, I had read every astronomy book in the public library. But my interest in space really didn't get off the ground until I got a telescope very similar to these. Telescope observing can be rewarding for everyone in the family. A telescope is a wonderful tool that can bring the amazement of the universe into your family's life. Information you read in an astronomy book takes on new meaning when you see it through a telescope. You make discoveries that you can share with your friends and family. A telescope does many things. It will make the moon and planets seem a lot closer. It will make dim stars appear brighter. You'll be able to see more stars through your telescope than you will with just your eye. And a telescope will let you see more detail. When you look at the moon, you will see detail 100 times smaller than you can see with your eye. With a little bit of practice, you can learn how to center your telescope on a wide variety of celestial objects. To set up your telescope and learn the basic functions of the accessories that come with it, follow the setup instructions that come with your telescope.
Keep in mind that a telescope magnifies. When the telescope is moved just a little bit, this may seem like a big jump when looking through the eyepiece. Always move the telescope gently and smoothly. Practice with your telescope in the daytime when there are more objects to see on the horizon. In fact, you can do some of this inside by looking through a window.
There are two basic types of telescopes. One uses a lens to focus light. This is called a refractor. Another type of telescope uses a curved mirror to focus light and create an image. This is called a reflector.
Some telescopes are designed to show an upright image when you look through them. These are terrestrial telescopes. They are used for looking at objects on the ground. Astronomical telescopes are designed for observing objects in space. They usually give an upside-down image unless a right-angle attachment is used. Both types of telescopes can be used to look at celestial objects. The most important part of a telescope is the optical element that focuses light.
A refracting telescope has a front lens that does this. A reflecting telescope uses a curved mirror to focus light. The wider the lens or mirror, the more stars you'll be able to see, or the more detail, like when viewing the moon. Most lens diameters are measured in millimeters. A 50 millimeter lens is 2 inches wide. A 75 millimeter lens is 3 inches wide. Lenses can be made from either glass or plastic. Glass lenses can be made to a higher optical quality. Your telescope comes with glass lenses. These were inspected and finished by hand to guarantee the best optical quality. Glass lenses are more resistant to scratching than plastic lenses are.
Using different eyepieces changes the power or magnification. Low power can be more effective since you get a wider field of view than at high power. The highest practical power is about 2 times the lens diameter in millimeters. While your telescope can show objects at very high power, it's best to learn how to use your telescope with the lower powers first. A sturdy tripod is important to keep the telescope steady. Small movements of the telescope are magnified in the eyepiece, and a tripod can reduce this. Another way to keep the telescope steady is to touch the telescope only when focusing or pointing the telescope. Don't hold on to the telescope after you get it pointed at the object you want. How much power or magnification to use depends on the eyepiece. Start with the lowest power eyepiece. Eyepieces are marked with numbers, such as 20 millimeter or 9 millimeter. The bigger the number, the lower the power.
The Barlow lens is an accessory that will increase your eyepiece's power 2 or 3 times. But you won't need to use your Barlow until you've had more practice with your telescope.
When starting out, become comfortable with the lower powers first. Low powers show more of the object and give a wider field of view. It is easier to find focus with a low power eyepiece. If you need to wear glasses while using your telescope, low powers let you keep your eye a little farther back from the eyepiece. This is called eye relief. At higher powers, it is harder to locate objects in the telescope. When you want to use higher power eyepieces, increase the power in steps. Start with a lower power eyepiece and center and focus the object. Then change the eyepiece to the next higher power. Repeat this with the next higher power until you reach the power you want. Remember to change the eyepieces as gently as possible. Slight movements of the telescope might move it off the object you are viewing. Practice changing power in the daytime so that you build your confidence and learn how familiar objects appear at different magnifications. Astronomy is a great hobby that can grow along with your child. A telescope can be fun and educational for children and their families. The right telescope can reinforce a young person's interest in astronomy. It's important to get a telescope that matches their skill level. As children use a telescope, their skill level will increase. They may outgrow their first scope and move up to a more complex telescope that supports their growing interests. To choose the best telescope for your child, learn about telescope basics. You will find that the more you know about telescopes, the more you can support your child's interest in astronomy. Here are some things to consider when your child is using the telescope. Many telescopes contain small parts, like eyepieces and set screws. Perhaps your child can use your help keeping track of the small pieces that make the telescope function. It takes time and practice to use a telescope. A child with a deep interest in astronomy may take the time to practice and learn how to use their telescope. A child who is just getting started may need help from parents. Will your child need your help to set the scope up? Make the observing sessions a family activity, and you can help when necessary. Telescopes are precision optical devices. You can model how to take care of the telescope so that it will provide good viewing whenever the skies are clear. Let's start by learning how to focus your telescope. Start with the lowest power eyepiece. Point your telescope at distant buildings or trees, a mile or more away. At first, sight on objects by looking alongside the telescope tube. Instead of quickly swinging the telescope to where you want to look, move it slowly left or right, then up or down to point at the object. Now look through the telescope at the distant object. Focus the eyepiece by slowly turning the focusing knob. Turn it so the eyepiece moves all the way in. Then go the other way and bring the eyepiece out. You will find a good focus as you go back and forth. Focusing is always easier when you start with low-power eyepieces. When you get the focus with the low power, don't change it or move the scope until you have aligned the finder. Now it's time to align the finder. The finder is a small, low-power telescope. It is used to point the main telescope at the object you want to view. For this to work, the finder and telescope need to be aligned so they point at the same distant object. Aligning the finder is good to practice in the daytime, so that it becomes easy to do. Finders can get bumped out of alignment when moving the telescope around. When you are good at the process in the daytime, it will be easier to do outside at night. When aligning the finder, use the telescope's lowest power eyepiece. Find a tall object like a tree or building or tower that is in the distance. Sight down the telescope tube to line the scope up with the target object. Look through the eyepiece and center and focus the object you are looking at. Look through the finder and gently adjust it so it is centered on the object. Check the main scope view to make sure that the object is still centered there. Move the scope bit by bit if necessary to recenter the object. Now it's time to check how well the finder is aligned. Choose another tall object and center it in the finder. Look through the main telescope and see how close you came. Repeat these steps to refine how well the finder and main scope are aligned. It's important to prepare your eyes for night viewing.
Your eye becomes more sensitive to faint light, like stars and planets, the longer it is not exposed to bright light. This is called dark adaptation, or getting your night vision.
When you are observing, do it in a place where you have the least number of bright outdoor lights around. Turning on a porch light while you are observing will ruin your night vision for 10 or 15 minutes until your eye becomes accustomed to the dark again. A flashlight is a good accessory to have when setting up your telescope. However, the bright white light can interfere with your night vision just like a porch light would. To keep this from happening, use a flashlight that makes red light. These can be purchased, or you can put a red filter over the front of the flashlight.
One trick that astronomers use to make a red flashlight is to get a red balloon and cut off the end. Then, take the piece that's largest and simply slip it over the end of a small flashlight. Now you have a flashlight with a red filter on it, and the flashlight can be used later for a white flashlight when you need to find something in the dark. Here are some tips on what to look at first and how to find it.
The first thing you look at should be bright and easy to find, but never use your telescope to look at the sun. You can permanently damage your eyes if you observe the sun. The moon is the brightest and largest nighttime object. Even so, it may be challenging to find it first. Get the lowest power eyepiece ready, but don't put it in the focuser just yet. Aim the telescope at the moon by sighting alongside the telescope tube. Then, center the moon in the finder. With your head a foot back from where the eyepiece would go, look through the focuser. If the scope is pointing at the moon, you will see a bright light in the focuser. That's the moon. It will be blurry because the eyepiece is needed to bring the image into focus. Now put the low power eyepiece in and take a look. If the moon isn't there, but you saw its light through the focuser, gently move the scope a very small amount to the left and right, then up and down. Usually, this brings the object into the center of the telescope. Now focus the eyepiece. Practice moving the scope very small amounts left and right and up and down to get used to how this affects the view. Change the eyepieces, trying not to bump or move the telescope, and see how the moon looks at different magnifications. Smaller craters will become more easily seen, but start with lower powers to get an idea of what you are looking at. What other objects beside the moon can you observe? The bright planets like Jupiter, Saturn, and Venus can be very rewarding in a telescope. Jupiter will show its 4 Galilean satellites, and you might see its cloud bands as gray stripes across the surface. Saturn's rings become visible at about 60 power. Venus shows phases, like the moon, depending upon where it is in its orbit around the Sun. Star clusters are groups of hundreds of stars that can be seen through your telescope. Giant gas clouds, called nebulas, can also be seen through your telescope. These are places far away in space where stars are forming. Start today, and I think you'll see that the telescope is much more than either a tool or a toy. It's an entry into a whole other world, one that is full of discovery and opportunity for your whole family.